My name is Clara Bennett. I am 24 years old, and I live in a small apartment in Sacramento, California. 6 months ago, my mother took the dark blue SUV that my grandmother Margaret had given me for my 24th birthday and handed the keys to my older sister Olivia. She said it as casually as if she were moving a chair across the living room. Olivia needs it more. You're single, Clara. Taking an Uber is convenient enough for you. I stood in my mother's kitchen, my hands still cold from washing dishes, watching her say those words without even blinking. Olivia was sitting in the living room, her 3-year-old son asleep on the sofa. Her husband Ryan kept his head down, staring at his phone, as if a car being taken from its rightful owner had nothing to do with him. I did not scream. I did not snatch the keys back. I did not slam my hand on the table. I only stared at the little compass keychain in Olivia's hand, the one I had bought for myself after receiving the car, and felt something inside my chest quietly fall apart. That car was not just transportation. It was the first time in my life I thought that maybe I had finally been seen. Maybe in this family, I was not just the easygoing daughter, the reasonable daughter, the daughter who could be pushed aside whenever Olivia needed more room to stand. And yet my mother took it away with one single sentence. Olivia needs it more. I had heard that sentence too many times in my life. Only the thing being taken from me changed each time. When we were little, it was the bigger bedroom. Later, it was tutoring money. After that, it was appointments days off my parents' attention, and finally the SUV my grandmother had bought for me. But what hurt the most was not losing the car. What hurt the most was that my mother said it as if I had no right to be upset. As if my silence meant agreement. As if because I was not married and did not have children, my life somehow weighed less than Olivia's, so everyone was free to bend it out of shape without asking me first. If you have ever been forced by your family to give in just because you were the easier one, comment. I want to know how many people have stood still the way I did not, because it did not hurt, but because they had grown used to their pain, not counting. 3 weeks later, we all attended my grandmother, Margaret's 70th birthday party. I arrived by Uber. Olivia arrived in my SUV. And when Grandma asked where my car was, my mother smiled in front of 40 relatives and said a sentence that made the entire room fall silent a few minutes later. Clara gave it to Olivia. She's such an understanding girl. At that moment, I still had no idea that Grandma Margaret had already prepared everything. Since I was young, I understood that in my family, Olivia did not need to ask for many things. She only had to want them. The rest my mother would find a way to explain, so everyone believed it made sense. Olivia was 4 years older than me with blonde hair like my mother, blue eyes like my mother, and even the same smile as my mother. Everywhere they went, people said they looked like copies of each other. I, on the other hand, looked more like my father with dark brown hair, quiet habits, and a tendency to stand back and observe instead of rushing into the center of a crowd. I was not striking. I was not loud. I did not know how to turn my needs into an emergency for the entire family. When we were little, if Olivia liked the doll I was playing with, my mother would say, "Clara, let your sister have it. You're easier going anyway." If Olivia wanted the bigger bedroom because she had more friends coming over, my mother would pat my head and say, "Try to understand your sister, sweetheart. You don't need as much space as Olivia does." If my school performance happened to fall on the same day as her volleyball practice, the one who almost always had to give something up was me. At first, I truly believed that being understanding was a compliment. I thought my mother was proud of me for being good, for giving in, for not making the family more exhausted than it already was. But the older I became, the more I realized that understanding in my house did not mean mature. It meant easy to overlook. Olivia only had to frown, and the whole family would ask what was wrong. I could sit silently through an entire dinner, and no one would notice. When Olivia got a low grade, my mother said she was under too much pressure. When I got a high grade, my mother said it was good, but I should not act as if I were special. When Olivia cried, it was an emergency signal. When I cried, I was being sensitive. My father was not cruel. He was just silent. And sometimes an adult silence inside a family can feel colder than a scolding. Whenever my mother's favoritism became too obvious, my father would usually look down at his plate, adjust his glasses, and say, "Come on, don't make it a big deal. We're family." I heard that sentence so many times that eventually all it took was for him to clear his throat, and I already knew I would be the one expected to lose. By the time I was 20, I had moved out. I rented a small apartment and worked as a freelance content writer for several companies in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Remote work allowed me to pay my own rent, electricity insurance, and even save a little every month. But in my mother's eyes, if I was not wearing office clothes and driving to a workplace at 8 in the morning, it was not a respectable career. At every family dinner, my mother would ask, "When are you going to get a real job?" Then she would turn to Olivia and ask about Noah, about Ryan, about the new house, about all the things my mother called a stable life. I would usually smile, lower my head, keep eating, and remind myself not to be sad. But the truth is, some wounds do not need to make a sound in order to grow deeper over the years. And before the SUV appeared, I had already believed that I would always be the person standing on the sidelines in my own family. My 24th birthday fell on a Saturday near the end of March. I had planned to stay home, order a box of pasta, finish a draft for a client, and go to bed early. By that age, I no longer expected much from my family. A birthday text, a cake bought in a hurry, or a dinner, where Olivia was still the one everyone asked about the most. I was used to that. But 1 week before my birthday, my mother called. "Come home on Saturday, Clara. The whole family has a surprise for you." Her voice sounded warmer than usual. Even though I had taught myself not to expect anything, a small part of me still hoped this time would be different. That afternoon, I wore a pale blue dress and took an Uber to my parents' house in the suburbs of Sacramento. When the car turned onto the familiar street, I saw Olivia and Ryan standing in the front yard. Noah was running around the grass with a red plastic ball. My father stood near the porch, and my mother was smiling brightly, the kind of smile she wore for moments when she wanted everything to look perfect. Then I saw it. A dark blue Honda CR-V was parked in the middle of the driveway, with a large red bow tied across the hood. The late afternoon sunlight spread over the glossy paint, making the car look as if it did not belong to my quiet little life. For a few seconds, I only stood there, my purse slipping from my shoulder, my heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. "Happy birthday, Clara," my mother said, stepping forward and handing me the keys. "The whole family wanted you to have a proper way to get around." I looked at the key in my mother's palm. It was just a small object, but in that moment, it felt as heavy as the recognition I had been waiting for all 24 years of my life. Olivia had gotten a car right after graduating from college. I had taken buses called Ubers and borrowed friends' cars whenever I needed to go somewhere far. I had never complained because I knew complaining would not change anything. But that day I thought maybe I had been wrong. Maybe my mother did remember. Maybe my family was only clumsy in the way they loved me, not truly forgetting me. At the edge of the yard, Grandma Margaret stood beside the white rose bushes, wearing a cream-colored coat, her silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head. When my eyes met hers, she smiled. It was not a surprised smile. It was the quiet smile of someone who had known everything in advance. "Your mother is right," she said. "It is time you had something that belongs only to you." I hugged her quickly because I was afraid that if I held on any longer, I would cry. I did not know then that her words were not only birthday wishes. They were a boundary she had quietly built around me. I also did not know that the vehicle title was not in my mother's hands, and not in mine either, but tucked inside one of Grandma Margaret's drawers. That day, I drove the SUV back to my apartment. The following weekend, I bought a small compass keychain and attached it to the keys as if reminding myself that from then on I had my own direction. I took care of that car as if it were proof that I had once been chosen. 10 months later, that proof was taken from my hands. 10 months after my birthday, Olivia's car broke down. I found out during a Sunday dinner at my parents' house. The weather had turned cold that day, and my mother had made the beef stew she always called a family bonding meal, even though most dinners like that only made me want to leave earlier. I drove there in the SUV parked along the curb and walked into the house carrying a box of apple pie from the bakery I liked. Olivia was already there with Ryan and Noah. Her silver minivan sat in the driveway covered in dust with one cracked taillight. I did not ask anything because I was used to the fact that Olivia's problems would eventually be announced on their own, while mine were only mentioned when they were useful to someone else. Halfway through dinner, my mother sighed and said Olivia's car had to go into the shop. There was a problem with the transmission, and the mechanic said it might take a few days. Ryan frowned and said his work schedule was packed so he could not drive Noah to preschool every morning. Olivia put her fork down, her eyes turning red almost instantly. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," she said. "Without a car, everything falls apart." I felt sorry for Noah. I understood that having a small child was not easy. But I also knew that in this family, whenever Olivia said she did not know what to do, everyone's eyes would start searching for something of mine to solve it. My mother looked at me. She did not speak right away. She only looked, and with that look alone, I could feel the old pattern closing around me again. "Clara," she said, her voice gentle as if she were suggesting something very small. "You work from home. You probably won't need your car much over the next few days, right?" I set my knife down. "What do you mean?" "I just think Olivia could borrow your car for a few days. Only until hers is fixed." The room went quiet for half a second. Ryan leaned down to wipe Noah's mouth. My father took a sip of water. Olivia looked at me with tired, expectant eyes, as if the only decent answer had already been written for me. I wanted to say no. I wanted to ask why they could not rent a car. Why Ryan could not change his shifts. Why every problem in Olivia's life always seemed to have an exit route running straight through mine. But then Noah dropped his spoon on the floor and started crying. My mother sighed. Olivia lowered her face. All those small sounds pushed toward me. "Just a few days, right?" I asked. My mother smiled immediately. "Of course. You're so good, Clara." I handed the keys to Olivia that same night. She hugged me quickly, thanked me, then turned back to soothe Noah. I took an Uber home to my apartment and told myself I was helping my family. That a few days without a car was not worth turning into a big issue. But a few days became a week. 1 week became 2. The messages I sent Olivia only came back with vague replies about the mechanic, still waiting for parts. When I called my mother, her voice had already grown colder. "Don't make things harder for your sister. Olivia needs the car more. What would you do in my place? Demand it back immediately, or wait for your family to do the right thing on their own? Comment 1 or 2. I stared at the Uber app glowing on my phone screen, and for the first time understood that this was no longer borrowing. This was them testing how much could be taken from me before I finally dared to say it hurt. That night I called Olivia in a voice that sounded unfamiliar even to me. It was not soft. It was not hesitant. It did not begin with an apology the way I usually did whenever I needed to ask for something that already belonged to me. "Olivia, I need my car back." The other end of the line went silent for a few seconds. I heard Noah saying something quietly in the background, then Olivia let out a breath. "Clara, this week really isn't convenient. My car still isn't fixed." "You said that last week." "Because that's what the mechanic told me." "I'm not making it up." I tried to keep my voice calm. "I'm not saying you're making it up. I'm saying I need my car." The words "my car" made the air between us turn cold. Olivia did not answer right away. I knew she was upset not because I was wrong, but because for the first time I had named ownership over something the family had already grown used to treating as available for redistribution. Mom said you agreed, she finally said. She said, you thought this made more sense because I have Noah. A quiet laugh escaped me. Not because anything was funny. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when someone has been pushed against a wall and still has to listen to other people, ask why she is not standing straighter. No one asked me. But you gave me the keys. Because Mom said it would only be a few days. Because you were crying. Because Noah was there. Because the whole room looked at me as if I would be the worst person in the world if I said no. Olivia fell silent. I could hear what she did not want to say. She knew this was not fair. She just did not want to give back the benefit she had received. Clara, she said, her voice lower, I really need that car right now. And I don't need to be asked. That sentence dropped between us like something heavy. Olivia did not respond. Then she said that after Grandma Margaret's birthday party, the whole family would sit down and talk about it. It sounded reasonable, but I knew it was only another way to stretch out time. After that call, I called my mother. She picked up immediately. You just made Olivia cry, she said, before I could even say hello. I stood by the window of my apartment looking down at the empty parking space below. Mom, that's my car. Don't be selfish. Your sister has a small child. I know. But that doesn't turn my property into family property. My mother gave a dry little laugh. Property, Clara? You're talking about a car as if it's some royal inheritance. I tightened my grip on the phone. Because it's the first thing in this family that has ever belonged to me. The line went quiet. Only for one beat, but long enough for me to know that my words had touched something my mother did not want to look at. Then she slipped back into her familiar voice. You always make everything dramatic. Olivia needs it more. You're single, you work from home, you're more flexible. You understand that. More flexible. That night, my silence no longer meant agreement. It was a crack growing wider inside me. I said, at Grandma's birthday party, I want to talk to you privately. I need the car back. My mother answered very quickly, fine. We'll talk there. Her voice was too calm. I should have noticed. A person like my mother never agrees to a conversation unless she has already taken control of the stage. I thought I was going to that party to resolve everything in private. I was wrong. Grandma Margaret's 70th birthday arrived on a chilly October afternoon. Sacramento was sunny that day, but it was a thin kind of sunlight spread across the street like a pale layer of glass. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, adjusted my emerald green dress, then looked down at my phone. The Uber app said my driver was 3 minutes away. I looked at the empty space where my SUV usually sat below my apartment building. It was only a vacant parking spot, but it made me feel as if someone had erased me from my own life. I used to walk down there every morning, place my hands on the steering wheel, and tell myself that I finally had something that belonged only to me. That afternoon, I had to wait for a stranger's car to take me to the birthday party of the very woman who had given me that SUV. During the ride to Rosewood Restaurant, I did not text my mother or Olivia. I only watched the trees along the road slide backward and rehearsed the words I planned to say. Mom, I don't want to make this a big issue. Mom, I only need my car returned. Mom, next time something involves me, please ask me first. Those sentences sounded reasonable, mature, and calm. I believed that if I spoke gently enough, my mother would not be able to turn me into the troublemaker. I believed there was still a way to let everyone save face. But when the Uber stopped in front of the restaurant, that belief broke apart very quickly. My dark blue SUV was parked 3 spaces away from the front entrance. On the rear window, there was a baby on board sticker I had never bought. In the back seat was Noah's child seat. His bag of toys leaned against the door, as if the car had always belonged to Olivia's family. I stood by the curb for a few seconds after the driver pulled away. The traffic behind me, the laughter near the restaurant entrance, the sound of high heels tapping against the stone walkway, all of it blended into one distant, unfamiliar noise. I looked at my own car and suddenly felt like an uninvited guest in my own story. Just then, Olivia stepped out from the other side of the vehicle. She wore a cream-colored dress, her hair neatly curled, one hand adjusting Noah's collar. Ryan was holding the boy with one arm and carrying his small jacket with the other. Olivia saw me and smiled. "Clara, you're here. Did you take an Uber?" The question was so casual that it hurt more than mockery would have. I looked at her then, at the SUV behind her. "Yeah. Convenient, right?" Olivia did not notice the blade hidden in those words. Or maybe she did notice, and chose not to hear it. "Let's go inside," she said. "Mom is stressed about the seating chart." I followed them into the restaurant. Ahead of me were warm, golden lights, white tablecloths, the clinking of glasses, and 40 relatives waiting for a cozy family celebration. No one knew that in just a few minutes the car sitting outside in the parking lot would tear my entire family out of their polite disguise. The private dining room at Rosewood Restaurant was so bright that I felt as if every expression on my face was exposed beneath the lights. Grandma Margaret sat at the head of the long table wearing a navy blue dress, her silver hair pinned neatly a strand of old pearls around her neck that my grandfather had once bought for her. At 70, she still had the straight posture of someone who was not easily fooled. I had been seated near the end of the table beside a few distant relatives. That did not surprise me. At family gatherings, Olivia was always close to the center, while I was usually placed somewhere that would not disturb my mother's perfect arrangement. The first hour passed with the sound of knives, forks, and birthday wishes. My mother moved around the room like a director. When she passed behind me, she rested one hand lightly on my shoulder and said, "Don't do anything later that will ruin your grandmother's mood." I looked up. "What do you mean?" My mother smiled, but her eyes did not. "You know what I mean." By the main course, Grandma Margaret suddenly turned to me. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear enough to cut through the smaller conversations around the table. "Clara, I don't see your blue SUV today. Where did you leave it?" The whole table turned to look at me. I had just opened my mouth when my mother laughed quick and bright, as if she had been waiting for that exact moment. "Oh, Mom, you didn't know," she said. "Clara gave the car to Olivia. Olivia has Noah, so she needed something safer. Clara is very understanding." The air around me froze. My mother turned toward a few relatives beside her and continued in a falsely proud voice. She knew her sister needed it more. "She's single, she works from home, and Uber is convenient enough. I'm honestly so glad Clara thinks about the family." The whispers began immediately. "That's so sweet. What a good little sister. That's what family is supposed to do." I sat still, the fork in my hand, feeling as heavy as stone. Part of me wanted to get up and leave. Another part of me wanted to shout that it was a lie. But the old habit held me in place. 24 years of being taught that my reaction would only make things worse did not disappear overnight. Then Grandma Margaret set her water glass down on the table. "Clara," she said, her eyes still on me, "did you really give that car to Olivia yourself?" My mother forced a small laugh. "Mom, of course she did. It's just a small family matter." Grandma Margaret did not look at my mother. "I am asking Clara." The silence stretched so long that I could hear the air conditioner humming above us. My mother looked at me with a warning in her eyes. Olivia lowered her head and adjusted Noah's napkin. I swallowed hard. "No," I said. It was only one word, but it made several people near me snap their heads up. I placed my fork down, my hands trembling beneath the edge of the table. "I didn't give the car to Olivia. Mom said she was borrowing it for a few days because her car broke down. After that, I asked for it back, but Mom said Olivia needed it more." No one asked if I agreed. My mother's face changed color. "Clara," she hissed, "don't be dramatic." Grandma Margaret tilted her head. "You have been trying to get the car back for 3 weeks. "Yes," I said. "But I was told to be flexible. Because I don't have my own family yet. Because my life is supposedly easier to rearrange." The room fell completely silent. My mother's smile disappeared. In that silence, Grandma Margaret slowly turned toward my mother, her expression so cold that everyone seemed to stop breathing. "Diane," she said, "so you lied in front of the entire family." My mother shot to her feet, the chair behind her scraping against the floor with a sharp, ugly sound. "This is a private family matter," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, even though both of her hands were already gripping the edge of the tablecloth. "You don't need to make everything so serious in front of everyone." Grandma Margaret looked at my mother for a long time. No loud anger. No shouting. It was that very calmness that made the room feel colder. "You just told a false story in front of 40 people, she said. "So the truth should be told in front of 40 people too." My mother turned pale. "Mom, please." "No," Grandma said. "Not this time." I sat still, my heart pounding so hard that my chest hurt. Part of me still wanted to ask Grandma to stop, not because my mother was right, but because I was too used to seeing myself as the reason the family atmosphere fell apart. But when Grandma Margaret placed her hand on the table and slowly stood up, I understood that she was not only protecting a car, she was protecting the parts of my life my mother had taken from me little by little. "Diane," she said, "do you remember last spring before Clara's birthday when you came to me asking for money from the family fund?" Whispers began moving around the table. Uncle Robert lifted his head. Aunt Patricia narrowed her eyes as if she were trying to remember something. My mother swallowed. "That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this." Grandma Margaret's voice sharpened. "You said you wanted to buy Clara a car. You said you knew she was often overlooked in this family, and you wanted to do something to make her feel important." I looked at my mother. In that moment, every sound around me seemed to pull far away. My mother had said that she had known I was being overlooked. That meant all those years I spent wondering whether I was just too sensitive. My mother had known the truth. She had simply chosen not to change. Aunt Patricia covered her mouth with one hand. Olivia looked at my mother as if she were seeing a stranger. "You misunderstood me," my mother said weakly. "I only wanted Clara to have a way to get around. And I gave you $28,000 from the family fund." Grandma Margaret continued. "Not so you could buy a shared vehicle. Not so you could keep the power to decide who it belonged to. I gave you that money because you promised the car would be Clara's." My mother shook her head. "That was just a manner of speaking." "No," Grandma Margaret said. "That was a commitment." The air in the room grew heavy. I saw my father lower his face while Ryan looked at Olivia as if asking whether they should leave. But no one stood up. No one dared to break the moment. Grandma Margaret turned toward Uncle Robert. "Robert," she said, "did you bring what I asked you to bring?" My mother immediately took one step toward her. "Mom, don't." Those two words were no longer a protest. They sounded like a plea. Grandma Margaret did not blink. "What are you afraid of, Diane? If you told the truth, the papers will only confirm the truth. If you lied, the papers will show everyone exactly how far you were willing to go." Uncle Robert slowly bent down and took a pale yellow envelope from the briefcase beside his chair. The entire room watched that envelope as if it did not contain documents, but the final blade that would cut through the polite shell of our family. And when Grandma Margaret took it from him, I knew my mother had lost control of the story. Grandma Margaret placed the envelope on the table gently, but the entire room seemed to hold its breath. I watched her thin fingers open, the small metal clasp slowly. My mother stood beside her chair, her face as white as paper. For the first time in my life, I saw that she no longer knew whether to smile, get angry, or give orders. Every role she had ever used to control this family fell away at once. Grandma Margaret said, "Read the first document." Uncle Robert pulled out a sheet with the seal of the California Department of Motor Vehicles on it. He adjusted his glasses, looked at a few lines, and then his voice caught. Vehicle registration, he read. Registered owner. Margaret Whitmore. A wave of whispers moved down the table. I sat frozen. You put the car in your name. Grandma Margaret turned to me, her eyes softening. Yes, Clara. I wanted you to use it. But I knew that if the paperwork stayed in your mother's hands someday, it would be turned into something she could bargain with. My mother immediately cut in. That was just a paperwork issue. Grandma Margaret did not look at her. Keep reading. Uncle Robert picked up the second page. This time, his expression changed clearly. This is a family fund disbursement agreement signed on March 15th of last year, he said. I, Diane Bennett, confirm that I have received $28,000 from the Whitmore Family Fund to be used exclusively to purchase a vehicle as a birthday gift for my daughter Clara Bennett. Aunt Patricia let out a sharp breath. Olivia covered her mouth with one hand. Ryan lowered his gaze to the table. Uncle Robert continued reading. I confirm that this vehicle, although registered under the name Margaret Whitmore, will be used as the private property of Clara Bennett. The vehicle may not be sold, transferred, loaned for an extended period, or handed over to any other family member without the clear written consent of Clara Bennett. The room went so silent that I heard a knife softly drop onto a plate near the end of the table. My mother trembled. At the time, I didn't think it was that serious. You signed it, Grandma Margaret said. Because you made me sign it. No, Uncle Robert said. Diane, I witnessed it that day. No one forced you. You even said this was the way Clara would know you truly cared. Then Grandma Margaret handed the final page to Uncle Robert. It was not a printed document. It was a handwritten letter. When Uncle Robert saw the signature at the bottom, he went quiet for a few seconds. Read it, Grandma Margaret said. He took a deep breath. Dear Mom, I promise the vehicle purchased with your gift will belong to Clara, and only Clara. I understand that she has often felt overlooked in this family, and I want this gift to let her know that she matters too. I could no longer feel my hands. Uncle Robert read more slowly. I will not take the vehicle away from Clara, nor will I allow anyone else to use it without her clear consent. I am grateful to you for helping me repair something I should have repaired a long time ago. No one in the room said a word. I looked at my mother. The woman who had always called me too sensitive had written with her own hand that she knew I had been overlooked. She knew. She had always known. And somehow that hurt more than the car being taken from me. Grandma Margaret folded the letter and placed it in front of my mother. Diane, she said, you did not forget that Clara was hurt. You only forgot when remembering it no longer benefited you. My mother opened her mouth, but there were no words large enough to cover the truth lying on the table. For the first time, no one told me not to be dramatic. No one said family had to give in. Because in front of 40 people, every excuse had died inside that yellow envelope. Grandma Margaret stood at the head of the table, both hands resting on the edge of the white tablecloth. After everything that had just been read aloud, no one could still look at the party as a party anymore. The birthday cake was still waiting on the side table, but in that room the only thing still alive was the truth. She turned to Olivia. Give your sister back the keys. Olivia lifted her face. Mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, stripping away her usual polished look. For one moment, I no longer saw the sister who had always been chosen first. I only saw a woman beginning to understand that she had received too much without ever asking what someone else had to lose. Grandma Olivia, said her voice hoarse, I truly didn't know those documents existed. I believe you didn't know about the documents, Grandma Margaret replied. But you knew Clara had never said yes. Olivia lowered her head. That sentence struck the one place no one could defend for her. She had let my mother tell her a story that benefited her, and then she had chosen to believe it because believing it was easier. Ryan placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder. She opened her purse and took out my key ring. The small compass keychain rested in her palm, scratched with a thin mark along one metal edge. For the past 3 weeks, that little thing had been living inside a life that was not mine. Olivia walked over to me. "Clara," she said, almost whispering. "I'm sorry. I didn't ask you. I let Mom decide for you because it benefited me." I held out my hand. The keys dropped into my palm, warm and heavy. When they touched my skin, I felt as if I had taken back more than a car. I had taken back proof that some things belonged to me and could not simply be carried away because I made less noise. "Thank you," I said. Just 2 words. At that moment, I could not give her more than that. Grandma Margaret turned to my mother. "Diane, now it's your turn." My mother stood motionless. Her face had turned red in uneven patches full of anger, shame, and one final attempt to hold on to control. She looked around the room, then looked at me, as if I were the one who had put her in this position. "Clara," my mother said very slowly, "I'm sorry for letting Olivia use the car without asking you." That was not an apology. It was a technical correction. There was none of my pain in it. There was none of the truth that she had lied to, hide the fact that she had taken something from me. Grandma Margaret narrowed her eyes. "Is that all you're apologizing for?" I stood up before my mother could answer. The keys rested in my hand. For the first time, I did not need Grandma to speak for me. "It's okay, Grandma," I said. Then I looked directly at my mother. "I heard that apology, but from today on, anything involving me, my property, my work, or my life, has to be asked directly of me." My mother pressed her lips together. "Clara, I was only trying to help the family." "No," I said, my voice trembling, but clear. "You decided for me. I am not the flexible one. Everyone gets to bend. I am your daughter. I deserve to be asked." The room went still. Aunt Patricia wiped her tears. Olivia lowered her face, and my father looked at me with the confused expression of a man realizing for the first time that his silence had also been a choice. Grandma Margaret smiled. "That is my granddaughter. If you also need a boundary like Clara's comment, I deserve to be asked." After what I said, the party was barely a party anymore. The servers still brought in the birthday cake. People still sang for Grandma Margaret, but everyone's voice was quiet, as if singing any louder might crack the silence in the room all over again. My mother sat back down her spine, stiff, her eyes fixed on the plate in front of her. She did not cry. People like my mother rarely cry when they lose control. They simply go silent, and that silence is not peace. It is more like a door slamming shut. I sat down too, the keys still in my hand. I did not put them into my purse right away. I just held them there, letting the metal edges press into my palm, reminding myself that what had just happened was real. Not imagination. Not a dream. I would wake from the next morning, only to call another Uber. After the cake was cut, Grandma Margaret stood again. The room immediately fell quiet. This time, my mother no longer had the strength to interrupt. "There is one more thing I want to make clear," Grandma said. "From today on, the Whitmore Family Fund will no longer support the grandchildren through their parents." Uncle Robert looked up. Aunt Patricia nodded very slowly. Grandma Margaret looked around the table. "You are all grown now. If any of you need help with education, buying a home medical treatment, or starting honest work, you will speak to me directly. No one else gets to decide whether your needs are real or not." My mother snapped her head toward her. "You can't do that. Everything has always gone through us. And that is exactly why I am changing it, Grandma," Margaret replied. When money passes through biased hands, it stops being help. It becomes a tool of control. No one argued. My father only looked down. Ryan held Noah, who had fallen asleep against his shoulder. Olivia wiped her tears but said nothing. I looked at my sister and saw that her familiar confidence was gone. All that remained was the emptiness of someone who had just realized her favorite seat had been built on someone else's silence. 20 minutes later, guests began to leave. No one spoke loudly. The hugs became awkward. The birthday wishes stretched on without meaning. My parents left first. My mother did not look at me as she walked through the door. I went out to the parking lot alone. The dark blue SUV stood beneath the yellow lights, still with Noah's sticker on the rear window. I peeled it off very slowly. Grandma Margaret stepped up behind me. Drive carefully, Clara. I turned and hugged her. Thank you, Grandma. She patted my back gently. Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing. What is it? Never make yourself invisible again. I nodded. That night I drove home, with the window rolled down, letting the cold wind hit my face. For the first time in a very long time, the road ahead did not look like an escape. It looked like a beginning. 6 months after that birthday party, my life did not become perfect in the way movies make life look perfect. My apartment was still small. Freelance work still had months where I had to calculate every bill carefully. The SUV still needed oil changes, and it still had a few scratches Olivia had left behind. But every time I held the keys with the compass keychain, I remembered that some things belonged to me, and I had the right to protect them. My mother and I still talked, but not the way we used to. She no longer called to give orders and expected me to obey quietly. If she asked for something involving me, I made her say it clearly. If she began with, "The family needs you," I would ask, "Are you asking me, or are you deciding for me?" Some calls still ended with tension, but at least I no longer disappeared. It took Olivia a few weeks to text me. She did not mention the car right away. She only asked if I wanted to get coffee. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. She arrived, looking tired, both hands wrapped around her cup as if she needed something to hold on to. I got used to being prioritized, she said, and I was wrong to think that was normal. I did not forgive her immediately. Forgiveness is not a switch you turn on just because someone else cries. But that day I saw real shame in Olivia's eyes. She began learning how to ask me, instead of assuming. And I began learning how to answer honestly, even when the answer was no. Grandma Margaret became a steady part of my Sundays. I would drive to her house, make tea, and listen to her tell stories about my grandfather, including stories about the time when she, too, had once been the child expected to give way. One afternoon she said to me, "Being flexible is not wrong, Clara. It only becomes wrong when other people use it to break you." Now I am 25 years old. I am still quiet. I still prefer to observe rather than fight to win every argument. But I no longer stay silent so other people can rewrite my truth. I am not the backup plan. I am not the easygoing person everyone can take from and call it family love. I am Clara Bennett. I have my work, my apartment, my car, and a life that does not need anyone's permission to exist. If you have ever been overlooked inside your own family, remember this: you have the right to be asked. You have the right to say no. And you have the right to take up a clear place in your own life.